In a small town nestled between rolling hills and quiet streams, where everyone knew each other's names and Sunday gatherings were the highlight of the week, lived an ordinary family of 4. The Jangs had moved there 5 years ago, seeking the peaceful rhythm of small-town life after the hustle and bustle of the city. Mrs. Jang taught science at the local high school, while Mr. Jang worked remotely as a graphic designer. Their 2 children, 10-year-old Leo and 8-year-old Mia, attended the town's only elementary school. There was nothing about little Mia that would make you look twice. She wore her dark hair in 2 braids that bounced when she walked. Her favorite outfit was a pair of overalls with stars sewn on the pockets, and she carried her lunch in a faded yellow box that had once belonged to her brother. She was shy around strangers, loved peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles, and collected colorful rocks she found on her way home from school. But there was something special about Mia that nobody knew yet, not even Mia herself. It started with humming. Mrs. Zhang first noticed it when Mia was just 4 years old. She would hear a tune on the radio or from a TV show, and hours later, she would hum it perfectly while coloring or playing with her toys. At first, Mrs. Zhang thought nothing of it. Many children loved music, after all. She has a good ear, Mr. Zhang would say with a proud smile when his wife mentioned it. But neither of them realized just how good that ear truly was. The Zhangs weren't a musical family. There was no piano in their modest home, no guitars hanging on walls, no weekend jam sessions. Mrs. Zhang had taken flute lessons as a child but had given it up after a year. Mr. Zhang enjoyed listening to classic rock while he worked, but couldn't carry a tune to save his life. They had never pushed their children toward music, focusing instead on reading, outdoor activities, and family game nights. Life continued in its comfortable, predictable pattern until one rainy Tuesday in April, when everything changed for the Zhang family. Pinewood Elementary had just received a generous donation from a former student who had gone on to make his fortune in tech. Among the gifts was a slightly worn but well-maintained upright piano for the music room. The school hadn't had a piano in years, not since budget cuts had scaled back the music program to recorders and simple percussion instruments. The children gathered around the gleaming instrument with wide eyes as Mrs. Walters, the music teacher, explained what a special gift it was. "This piano will open up so many new possibilities for our music classes," she said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "Starting next week, I'll be offering basic piano lessons during lunch break for anyone interested." Mia stood at the back of the group, her small fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Unlike her classmates who were whispering excitedly or raising hands to ask questions, she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the black and white keys. Something about them called to her in a way she couldn't explain, like seeing an old friend she didn't know she had. That night at dinner, Mia poked at her mashed potatoes with unusual quietness. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Mrs. Zhang asked, exchanging a concerned look with her husband. Mia nodded, then hesitated. "We got a piano at school today." "That's wonderful," Mr. Zhang said, passing the peas. "Maybe you can learn a few songs." "Mrs. Walters is giving lessons," Mia continued, her voice growing a bit more confident. "But there's a waiting list already." Mrs. Zhang noticed the disappointment in her daughter's eyes. "Would you like to sign up for those lessons, Mia?" The little girl nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Yes, please." But as it turned out, the waiting list was long, and with only one lunch break per week dedicated to lessons, it would be months before Mia's turn came. Mrs. Walters apologized, promising to fit her in as soon as possible. "It's just so wonderful to see such enthusiasm for music," she told Mrs. Zhang during a brief parent-teacher meeting. "I had no idea so many students would be interested." Mia accepted the news with a small nod and a brave smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That night, she dreamed of piano keys dancing under gentle fingers, creating sounds that made her heart feel full. The following Monday, during recess, when most children rushed outdoors to claim swings and slides, Mia lingered behind. She glanced down the empty hallway, then quietly made her way to the music room. The door was unlocked, and inside the piano waited in silence, a beam of sunlight falling across its keys through the half-closed blinds. Mia approached it carefully, almost reverently. She placed her small hand on the smooth wood, feeling its coolness against her palm. Then, with gentle movements, she climbed onto the bench and lifted the fallboard to reveal the keys beneath. She stared at them for a long moment, her heart beating quickly in her chest. Then hesitantly, she pressed one key with her index finger. The clear note hung in the air around her. She pressed another and another, discovering how the sounds changed as she moved from left to right. And then, something remarkable happened. Mia closed her eyes and let her fingers find the melody she'd been hearing in her head since seeing the piano, the theme song from her favorite cartoon show. Note by note, her small hands found their way across the keyboard, recreating the cheerful tune with surprising accuracy. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching, or notice Mrs. Walters standing in the doorway, her mouth open in astonishment. "Mia?" the teacher finally said, causing the girl to jump and pull her hands away from the keys as if they'd burned her. "I'm sorry," Mia said quickly, sliding off the bench. "I know I shouldn't be in here without permission." But Mrs. Walters wasn't angry. She crossed the room slowly, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Mia, have you played piano before?" The little girl shook her head, looking down at her shoes. "Then how did you just play that melody? Who taught you?" "Nobody," Mia whispered. "I just heard it in my head and my fingers found the right keys." Mrs. Walters sat down on the bench and patted the spot beside her. After a moment's hesitation, Mia joined her. "Can you play it again for me?" the teacher asked gently. With a nervous glance, Mia placed her hands back on the keys and began to play. The melody flowed even more smoothly this time, her confidence growing with each note. When she finished, she looked up to find Mrs. Walters staring at her with wide eyes. "That's extraordinary, Mia," the teacher said softly. "Most people need lessons and practice to play even simple melodies. What you just did is very special." Mia's cheeks flushed with pleasure, but she shook her head. "It doesn't feel hard. The notes just make sense to me." Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Walters arranged for Mia to visit the music room during her free period. She watched in amazement as the 8-year-old intuitively understood concepts that took most students years to master. Mia could hear a melody once and reproduce it perfectly. She developed her own method of playing chords that accommodated her small hands. Most remarkably, she seemed to understand music on an instinctive level that defied explanation. "I've never seen anything like it," Mrs. Walters told the Jangs during a hastily arranged meeting after school. "Your daughter has what we call perfect pitch, the ability to identify or produce any musical note without a reference point. But it's more than that. She has an innate understanding of music theory that most trained adults struggle with." Mr. and Mrs. Jang listened in stunned silence. Their daughter, their ordinary rock-collecting, star-overall-wearing daughter, had an extraordinary gift they'd never suspected. "What should we do?" Mrs. Jang finally asked, reaching for her husband's hand. "First, I'd recommend getting her access to a piano at home, even a keyboard to start," Mrs. Walters suggested. "And I'd like to introduce her to a colleague of mine who specializes in working with musically gifted children." That weekend, the Jangs brought home a digital keyboard they'd found at a second-hand shop. Mia's eyes lit up when she saw it, and she ran her fingers lovingly over the keys before sitting down to play. The living room filled with music as she experimented with songs she'd heard on the radio, television jingles, and even the complex, classical piece that had played during a commercial for luxury watches. Her brother Leo watched from the doorway, amazement written across his face. "How do you do that, Mia?" he asked. She paused, considering the question seriously. "I don't know exactly. When I hear music, I can see it in my mind like a picture. Then my fingers just know where to go to make the same picture." As word of Mia's unusual talent spread through their small town, people began to stop by the Jung house on evenings and weekends. Neighbors would sit in the living room, cups of tea in hand, listening in wonder as the little girl with braids played everything from Bach to Beatles with equal ease and joy. Mrs. Jang watched her daughter transform before her eyes, blossoming from a shy child into a confident musician who smiled as her fingers danced across the keys. Mia was still the same girl who collected rocks and loved peanut butter sandwiches, but now she had found a part of herself that had been waiting to be discovered. None of them could have imagined what was coming next. or how Mia's extraordinary gift would soon capture the attention of the world beyond their small town. Word of Mia's unusual talent spread beyond their small town faster than anyone expected. A parent visiting from the city happened to be a music professor at the state university. He had stopped by his cousin's house for dinner and heard about the young girl who could play anything by ear. Curious but skeptical, he asked if he could hear her play. That Saturday afternoon, Professor Chen sat in the Zhang's modest living room, watching as 8-year-old Mia settled herself on the bench of her digital keyboard. Her feet barely reached the floor, and her hands looked impossibly small against the keys. She wore her favorite star-patterned overalls and had tied her hair back with a ribbon that didn't quite match. "What would you like to hear?" Mrs. Zhang asked the professor, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Until now, Mia had only played for family, neighbors, and her music teacher. Professor Chen smiled kindly. "How about something classical? Does Mia know any Mozart or Beethoven?" Mrs. Zhang looked uncertain, but before she could reply, Mia spoke up. "I heard a song on Mrs. Walters' radio yesterday. She said it was Mozart." Without further explanation, Mia placed her hands on the keys and began to play Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16 in C major. Professor Chen's polite smile faded, replaced by an expression of genuine astonishment. He leaned forward, watching Mia's small fingers move across the keys with precision and fluidity that defied her age and experience. The piece was not particularly complex by professional standards, but for an untrained 8-year-old to play it perfectly after hearing it once was nothing short of remarkable. When Mia finished, the room fell silent. Professor Chen cleared his throat. "That was extraordinary," he said finally. "Mia, how long have you been taking piano lessons?" "I don't take lessons," Mia replied simply. "I just play what I hear." The professor exchanged glances with Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, who nodded in confirmation. "She's been playing for less than 2 months," Mrs. Zhang explained. "Ever since her school got a piano. She's never had formal training." Professor Chen shook his head in wonder. "In my 30 years of teaching music, I've encountered perhaps 2 or 3 students with this level of natural ability." He turned to Mia's parents. "Your daughter has a rare gift. She should be studying with professionals who can nurture her talent." Over cups of tea after Mia had gone outside to play with her brother, Professor Chen told the Zhangs about the Young Musicians Competition, an annual event hosted by the state's symphony orchestra. "The preliminary round is in 3 weeks," he explained. "The competition is primarily for students between ages 10 and 18, who have been studying for years, but there's no official age minimum. Given what I've just witnessed, I believe Mia should enter." Mrs. Zhang looked worried. "Wouldn't that be overwhelming for her? She's only just discovered this ability." "It could be," Professor Chen acknowledged, "but it would also give her exposure to other young musicians and potentially open doors to opportunities she wouldn't otherwise have. Scholarships, specialized programs, access to better instruments." Mr. Zhang, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "What about Mia? Shouldn't we ask what she wants?" And so that evening, they explained the competition to Mia as simply as they could. They emphasized that it was her choice, that they would support her whether she decided to enter or not. Mia considered the idea, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Would I get to play on a real grand piano, like the ones I've seen on TV?" "Yes," her father answered. "A beautiful grand piano on a big stage." Her eyes widened. "Would people be watching?" "Yes, quite a few people," her mother said gently. "Does that make you nervous?" Mia thought about it, then shook her head. "When I play, I don't really notice other people. It's just me and the music." She smiled, her decision made. "I want to try." The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Professor Chen visited twice more, bringing sheet music for Mia to look at, though she still preferred to play by ear. Mrs. Walters allowed her to practice on the school piano every day during lunch and after classes. The Zhangs even drove to the city one weekend so Mia could experience playing on a grand piano at Professor Chen's university studio. For the preliminary round, each contestant would play 2 pieces of their choice, demonstrating their range and technical ability. Mia selected Mozart's sonata and, to everyone's surprise, a complex jazz piece she had heard on one of Professor Chen's recordings. "Are you sure, sweetie?" Mrs. Zhang asked. "That's a very difficult piece." Mia nodded confidently. "I like how it bounces and jumps. It makes me feel happy inside." The day of the preliminary round arrived with clear skies and a cool spring breeze. The Zhangs drove to the city with Mia's best dress carefully hung in the back of the car and her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked into her backpack for good luck. The competition was held at the city's concert hall, a grand building with stone columns and high ceilings that made footsteps echo. Mia stared up in wonder as they entered the lobby, where dozens of young musicians with their parents and teachers milled about, clutching instrument cases and sheet music. Mrs. Zhang felt her daughter's hand tighten around hers. "Are you feeling nervous now?" she whispered. Mia shook her head, but her wide eyes betrayed her. They all looked so much older than me, it was true. Most of the competitors were teenagers, poised and confident in formal attire, discussing musical techniques with terms Mia had never heard. Many had been taking lessons since they were Mia's age or younger, with thousands of hours of practice behind them. As they checked in at the registration table, the volunteer's eyebrows rose when she saw Mia. 8 years old? That must be a mistake. No mistake, Mr. Zhang said firmly. Professor Chen from the State University recommended she participate. The volunteer looked doubtful, but handed them a participant number, 23, and directed them to a waiting area where Mia could prepare. Before her performance, in the practice room, Mia sat at an upright piano, her legs dangling from the bench. Around her, other competitors ran through scales and difficult passages, some looking stressed while others appeared coolly confident. A few glanced curiously at the small girl in the cornflower blue dress, but most were too focused on their own preparations to pay her much attention. One boy, perhaps 12 years old, stopped beside her. "Aren't you a bit young to be here?" he asked, not unkindly. Mia nodded. "I'm 8. How long have you been playing?" "About 2 months." The boy laughed, assuming she was joking. "Right, well, good luck." He walked away, shaking his head. Mrs. Zhang, who had overheard, knelt beside her daughter. "Don't mind him, Mia. Just play the way you always do. For the joy of it." As the competition progressed, they could hear snippets of performances from the main hall, precise, polished renditions of classical pieces that the young musicians had no doubt practiced hundreds of times. Mia listened intently, sometimes closing her eyes and moving her fingers slightly as if playing along. When they called number 22, Mrs. Zhang helped Mia straighten her dress and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Ready?" she asked. Mia took a deep breath and nodded. "I think the piano is waiting for me." Mr. and Mrs. Zhang found seats in the auditorium while Mia was led backstage. The panel of judges sat at a long table near the front. 3 distinguished-looking musicians with serious expressions and clipboards. The audience was sparse for the preliminary round, mostly parents and teachers of the competitors. Participant number 23, Mia Zhang, announced a woman's voice over the speaker system. A murmur rippled through the audience as the tiny figure in blue walked onto the stage. Someone whispered, "Is that a child?" Another answered, "Must be a prodigy." Mrs. Zhang held her breath as Mia approached the gleaming grand piano. It seemed enormous compared to her small frame. Mia bowed to the judges, then carefully climbed onto the bench, adjusting her position until she could reach the pedals. There was a moment of perfect silence. Then, without opening any sheet music, Mia began to play Mozart's Sonata No. 16. Her hands moved with certainty and grace, bringing forth the joyful, bright notes that danced through the concert hall. She played with a natural expressiveness that many trained musicians strive for years to achieve. When the final notes of the Mozart piece faded, there was a pause before scattered applause broke out. The judges looked at each other, eyebrows raised. Mia, without waiting for a signal, transitioned directly into her second piece, the complex jazz composition with its syncopated rhythms and challenging runs. Here, Mia truly shone. She swayed slightly as she played, a small smile on her face, completely absorbed in the music. Her interpretation was not that of a classical pianist carefully following a score, but of someone who had internalized the very essence of the piece and was now bringing it to life in her own unique way. When she finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. One of the judges was actually smiling, a rare sight in the preliminary rounds. Mrs. Zhang felt tears in her eyes as Mia stood, bowed again, and walked off stage with the same quiet dignity with which she had entered. In the lobby afterward, Professor Chen found them, his face alight with excitement. "Remarkable," he exclaimed. "Absolutely remarkable. I've already heard several judges talking about her. They've never seen anything like it. Did I do okay? Mia asked, looking up at him with anxious eyes. He knelt down to her level. You did more than okay, Mia. You were magnificent. 2 days later, the phone rang in the Zhang household. The list of finalists for the Young Musicians competition had been posted online. Mia's name was among them. There's something else, Professor Chen said over the phone, his voice both excited and concerned. For the final round, they've chosen a special piece that all finalists must perform. It's Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu, one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. Most of the finalists have been preparing it for months, knowing it was a potential requirement. Mrs. Zhang felt her heart sink. Mia has less than 2 weeks to learn it. Yes, Professor Chen replied. And while her natural ability is extraordinary, this piece requires technical skills that typically take years to develop. The judges are curious to see what she can do with it. That evening, they played a recording of the piece for Mia. The music filled their living room, beautiful, complex, and dauntingly fast. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang exchanged worried glances as they watched their daughter listening. Her eyes closed, her fingers occasionally twitching in her lap. When the recording ended, Mia opened her eyes. It's like a storm, she said softly, with quiet moments in between like someone whispering secrets. Her mother smiled at the poetic description. Do you think you can learn to play it in 2 weeks, sweetheart? Mia considered this seriously, then nodded. I can try. I really want to. What none of them realized was that this was just the beginning of a journey that would take their family, and especially young Mia, places they had never imagined possible. The Zhang household transformed in the days following the preliminary round. Their living room became a practice studio, with Mia spending hours at her keyboard. The recording of Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu played on repeat, filling the small house with its complex melodies and rapid arpeggios. Professor Chen visited every other day, amazed by how quickly Mia absorbed the piece. She didn't learn it the way other students did, by reading sheet music and practicing measure by measure. Instead, she listened repeatedly, her eyes closed, fingers moving silently in her lap. Then she would play sections from memory, working out the fingering through trial and error. It's as if she can see inside the music, Professor Chen told Mr. and Mrs. Zhang as they watched Mia practice. Most pianists spend years developing the technical skills for a piece this difficult. The way she's approaching it is completely unconventional. Mrs. Zhang worried about the pressure on her daughter. Should we be pushing her this hard? She's only 8. Look at her. Mr. Zhang said softly, gesturing toward their daughter. Mia sat at the keyboard, completely absorbed. There was no tension in her small shoulders, no frustration on her face when she missed a note or stumbled over a difficult passage. She simply tried again, adjusting her approach until it sounded right to her ear. Playing piano didn't exhaust her, it energized her. She's not doing this for us, Mr. Zhang continued. She's doing it because the music calls to her. A week before the final round, Mia's school held an impromptu concert. Mrs. Walters had arranged it as a practice performance, giving Mia the experience of playing her competition pieces for an audience larger than just her family and Professor Chen. The entire school gathered in the gymnasium. Teachers set up chairs for parents and community members who had heard about the remarkable young pianist. The upright piano from the music room stood on the makeshift stage, its warm brown surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Mia's classmates had never heard her play. To them, she was just the quiet girl with the rock collection, who sometimes sat alone at lunch. They fidgeted in their seats, whispering and giggling, not understanding the significance of what they were about to witness. When Mia walked onto the stage in her blue dress, a hush fell over the crowd. She looked so small standing beside the piano, her dark braids tied with ribbons, her patent leather shoes barely touching the floor when she sat on the bench. Mrs. Walters introduced her with pride in her voice. Our very own Mia Zhang, finalist in the State Young Musicians Competition, will perform 2 pieces for us today. Mia began with Mozart, the piece flowing from her fingers with effortless grace. As she played, the restless students grew still, their young faces showing surprise and wonder. Even the kindergartners, normally unable to sit quietly for more than a few minutes, watched transfixed. When she transitioned to the Chopin piece, a collective gasp rippled through the audience. The complexity of the music was apparent even to those with no musical training. Mia's small hands moved across the keys with astonishing speed and precision, drawing forth cascades of notes that seemed impossible for someone her size and age to produce. Though she hadn't yet mastered every section, occasionally simplifying the left hand to accommodate the stretch her small fingers couldn't quite make, the essence of the piece remained intact, its emotional core beautifully expressed. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence before the gymnasium erupted in applause. Students jumped to their feet, cheering for their classmate with newfound respect and awe. Parents and teachers exchanged looks of disbelief and wiped away tears. Mia's classmate Lily, who sat next to her in math, turned to her mother. "Did you know Mia could do that?" She never said anything about it. As Mia took a shy bow, her brother Leo hollered from his seat, "That's my sister." His face beamed with unabashed pride. After the concert, Mrs. Walters hugged Mia tightly. "You've given this school a tremendous gift today," she whispered. "You've shown everyone the magic that can happen when you discover what you were born to do." The day of the final competition arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle that tapped against the car windows as the Jongs drove to the city. Mia sat quietly in the back seat, her fingers moving slightly in her lap, rehearsing passages from memory. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Mrs. Zhang asked, turning to look at her daughter. "Like butterflies are having a party in my tummy," Mia replied, making her parents laugh. Mr. Zhang caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "That's normal before something important. Just remember, no matter what happens today, we couldn't be prouder of you." The concert hall bustled with activity when they arrived. The finals were open to the public and a substantial crowd had gathered. Parents, teachers, music students, and classical music enthusiasts from across the state. Posters announced the event. Young Musicians Competition Finals. Discover tomorrow's stars today. Backstage, the atmosphere crackled with nervous energy. The 10 finalists, ranging in age from Mia's 8 years to a poised 18-year-old girl bound for Juilliard in the fall, prepared in various ways. Some paced, others sat with eyes closed, mentally rehearsing. A few frantically practiced difficult passages on silent keyboards. Mia stood slightly apart, watching everything with curious eyes. She wore her best dress, a new one her parents had bought for the occasion, deep purple with a satin ribbon at the waist. Her hair had been carefully braided by her mother that morning, each plait wrapped around her head like a crown. A tall boy with wire-rimmed glasses approached her. "You're the young one everyone's talking about, aren't you?" he asked. Mia nodded shyly. "I'm Peter, I'm 16, he said, extending his hand formally as if she were an adult. "I've been playing for 11 years. Mia shook his hand. "I'm Mia, I'm 8. "I've been playing for 2 months. Peter's eyes widened. 2 months? That's impossible." Mia shrugged, not knowing how to explain. "Well," Peter said after a moment, "good luck out there. The acoustics in this hall are incredible. When you play, imagine sending the sound all the way to the back row." She smiled, grateful for the advice. "Good luck to you too." The competition order had been determined by random drawing. Mia would perform 7th. She and her parents found a quiet corner where she could listen to the performances before hers. One by one, the young pianists took the stage, each delivering a polished, technically impressive rendition of Chopin's challenging piece. The audience applauded enthusiastically after each performance, especially for Peter, whose interpretation was both passionate and precise. As her turn approached, Mia felt the butterflies in her stomach multiply. She clasped her hands together to stop them from trembling. "Remember," her father whispered, kneeling beside her. "Just play it the way you hear it in your head, the way that makes you happy." Mrs. Zhang squeezed her shoulder. "We love you, Mia. Now go make that piano sing." When they called her name, Mia walked onto the stage with small, careful steps. The grand piano gleamed under the spotlight, its lid raised to project the sound throughout the hall. The audience murmured as they saw the tiny figure approach the instrument. Those who hadn't attended the preliminaries were clearly surprised by her youth. The judges sat at their table, pens poised over scoring sheets. Among them was a famous concert pianist whose recordings Mia had been listening to all week. Mia bowed to the audience and judges, then settled herself on the bench, adjusting it slightly forward to accommodate her height. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The opening notes of the Fantasy Impromptu filled the concert hall, delicate yet confident. As Mia progressed into the piece, something extraordinary happened. She wasn't simply reproducing the notes she had heard. She was interpreting them, adding subtle nuances that made the familiar composition sound fresh and alive. Her small hands, which had seemed a limitation during practice, now moved with remarkable agility. Where adult pianists might rely on the stretch of their fingers, Mia compensated with quick, precise movements that accomplished the same musical effect. It wasn't the conventional approach, but it worked beautifully. The middle section of the piece slowed, becoming tender and introspective. Mia swayed slightly as she played, her expression serene, lost in the world of the music. Those watching forgot about the competition, forgot about the technical aspects they were supposed to be evaluating. They were simply carried away by the pure emotional connection between the child and the music. As Mia reached the final section, returning to the rapid tempo of the beginning, her confidence grew. Her fingers flew across the keys with increasing assurance, building toward the dramatic conclusion. The final chords resonated through the hall, powerful and definitive, seeming impossible to have come from such a small performer. When the last note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Even some of the judges were standing, protocol forgotten in the face of what they had just witnessed. Mia looked startled by the response. She stood and bowed again, a shy smile crossing her face as the applause continued. When she walked off stage, her parents were waiting, their eyes shining with tears of pride and joy. That was beautiful. Mia, her mother whispered, embracing her. I made a mistake in the middle part, Mia said, frowning slightly. Her father laughed. Nobody notices, sweetheart. They were too busy being amazed by you. After the final competitor performed, there was a brief intermission while the judges deliberated. Mia sat between her parents and the audience, swinging her legs and sipping apple juice from a small box. Around them, people whispered and pointed, clearly discussing the remarkable young pianist. Finally, the head judge stepped onto the stage with an envelope. The audience fell silent as he adjusted the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been judging this competition for 15 years, and I can honestly say this has been one of the most extraordinary finals we have ever witnessed. He spoke about the high level of talent displayed by all the competitors, emphasizing how difficult the judge's decision had been. Mia listened politely, though some of the long words were hard to understand. Before announcing our winners, I want to acknowledge something unprecedented in our competition's history. One of our finalists has demonstrated a level of natural musicality that has astonished our entire panel. The audience stirred. Mrs. Zhang reached for her husband's hand, squeezing it tightly. And now for our results. Third place goes to Peter Novak. Peter walked onto the stage, accepting his certificate and small trophy with a gracious bow. Second place goes to Lily Chen. An elegant teenage girl in a red dress joined Peter on stage. And our first place winner, by unanimous decision of our judges, Mia Zhang. The concert hall exploded with applause as Mr. and Mrs. Zhang urged their stunned daughter to her feet. Mia walked slowly back to the stage, looking tiny next to the older competitors as she accepted her trophy, almost too big for her to hold. The head judge knelt down to her level, speaking into the microphone he still held. Mia, you've shown us something truly special today. Can you tell us how long you've been studying piano? Mia looked out at the sea of faces, finding her parents in the audience for reassurance. Then she spoke clearly into the microphone. 2 months, sir, but the music has been in my head much longer. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by murmurs of disbelief and renewed applause. As Mia stood there, clutching her trophy and blinking in the spotlight, she had no idea how dramatically her life was about to change. The morning after the competition, the Zhangs woke to the sound of their phone ringing. It was barely 7 o'clock and Mia was still asleep, her trophy standing on the nightstand beside her bed. Hello, Mrs. Zhang answered groggily. Is this the residence of Mia Zhang, yesterday's Young Musicians competition winner? Asked an enthusiastic female voice. It was the first of many calls that day. Local newspapers wanted interviews. The state television station requested Mia for their evening news program. Music schools inquired about her training and background. Even a national morning show producer called, asking if the Zhangs could fly to New York the following week. Mr. Zhang sat at the kitchen table rubbing his temples. What do we do? This is happening so fast. Mrs. Zhang placed a cup of tea in front of him. We protect Mia. She's still just a little girl who collects rocks and can't remember to brush her teeth without being reminded. When Mia finally padded into the kitchen in her cartoon character pajamas, her parents tried to explain the situation as simply as possible. "A lot of people are very excited about your playing, sweetheart," Mrs. Zhang said. "They want to meet you and hear you perform." Mia considered this while spooning cereal into her mouth. "Can I still go to school and play with Leo?" Her parents exchanged a look of relief. Despite the whirlwind around her, Mia's priorities remained those of a normal 8-year-old. "Of course you can," her father assured her. "School comes first." And being a kid, they agreed to a limited number of local appearances. Mia would play on the weekend news program and give one newspaper interview. Everything else would wait until they had more time to think. Professor Chen arrived that afternoon, his car barely fitting into their driveway due to the news van already parked outside. "I see it's begun," he said grimly when Mr. Zhang opened the door. Inside, he sat with the family in their living room, now crowded with flowers sent by well-wishers. "What happened yesterday wasn't just unusual," he explained. "It was extraordinary enough to attract serious attention. You need to be prepared." He outlined what typically happened to young musical prodigies: intensive training, special schools, international competitions, concert tours. It sounded overwhelming. "But she's so young," Mrs. Zhang protested. "And she's only been playing for 2 months. Professor Chen nodded. "That's precisely why everyone is so interested. What Mia did shouldn't be possible. She played a piece that takes most pianists years to master. After hearing it for just 2 weeks, the musical world wants to understand how." Mia, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I just hear it in my head. Then my fingers find it on the keys." Professor Chen smiled at her. "That's called having perfect pitch and exceptional auditory memory. Combined with your natural sense of musical interpretation, it's extremely rare." The local news segment aired that Sunday evening. Viewers across the state watched as the small girl in a purple dress played a simplified version of Beethoven's Für Elise on the studio's grand piano. The host, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, interviewed Mia afterward. "How does it feel to win such a prestigious competition at your age?" she asked. Mia thought for a moment. "Happy and a little scary." "Scary? Why scary?" "Because now people expect me to be good all the time." The honest answer charmed the audience and viewers at home. Clips of the interview began circulating online, reaching far beyond their small state. By Monday morning, Mia's story had gone national. A video someone had taken of her competition performance was trending online with millions of views. Comments poured in from around the world, expressing amazement at the young girl's talent. When Mia returned to school, her classmates treated her like a celebrity. Children asked for her autograph on notebook paper. Teachers stopped her in the hallway to offer congratulations. The principal announced that the school would be purchasing a better piano, with funds donated by a local business specifically for Mia to practice on. Amidst the excitement, Mia found herself seeking quiet corners during recess. The attention made her uncomfortable. She missed the days when she could play her music in peace without everyone watching and commenting. One afternoon, she hid in the library, sitting cross-legged on the floor between bookshelves. Her brother Leo found her there, flipping through a book about the ocean. "Everyone's looking for you," he said, sliding down to sit beside her. "Lily wants you to sit with her group at lunch now." Mia made a face. Lily and her friends were the popular girls who had never paid attention to her before. Leo nudged her with his elbow. "You don't have to if you don't want to. Just because you're famous now doesn't mean you have to change your friends." Mia leaned against her brother gratefully. "I don't feel any different. But everyone treats me differently." "I don't," Leo promised. "You're still my annoying little sister who steals the last cookie." She giggled, feeling better. That evening, a black car with tinted windows pulled up in front of the Zhang house. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He rang the doorbell and introduced himself as Anthony Wellington, representative of the International Academy of Musical Excellence. "The Academy has been following young Mia's story with great interest," he explained, as he sat in their living room. "We believe she possesses a truly exceptional gift that should be nurtured by the finest instructors in the world." Mr. and Mrs. Zhang listened politely as Mr. Wellington described the Academy, a prestigious institution in Vienna that accepted only the most talented young musicians from around the globe. He opened his briefcase and showed them glossy brochures of beautiful buildings, concert halls, and smiling students playing various instruments. "We would like to offer Mia a full scholarship to study with us, beginning this fall," he announced. "All expenses paid, including housing for one parent to accompany her." Mrs. Zhang's teacup clattered as she set it down. "Vienna, as in Austria? But that's thousands of miles away. The opportunity of a lifetime," Mr. Wellington countered smoothly. "Mia would have access to world-class instructors, perform in historic venues, and develop her gift to its fullest potential." Mr. Zhang frowned. "She's only 8 years old. She needs stability, friends, a normal childhood. Not to mention our family would be separated." Mr. Wellington's smile remained fixed. "With respect, sir, Mia is not a normal child. Her talent is 1 in a million. To deny her this opportunity would be to waste a precious gift." The conversation grew tense. Unnoticed, Mia slipped away from where she'd been listening at the top of the stairs and went to her room. She picked up her stuffed rabbit, hugging it tightly as she tried to make sense of what she'd heard. Vienna sounded far away. Would she have to leave Leo? And her friends? And her collection of special rocks from the creek behind their house? The thought made her stomach hurt. Later that night, after Mr. Wellington had left with promises to call the following week for their decision, Mrs. Zhang found Mia sitting on her bed, looking at a globe she'd borrowed from her brother's room. Her small finger traced the vast distance between their state and Austria. "Is Vienna where I have to go now?" Mia asked, her voice small. Mrs. Zhang sat beside her, stroking her hair. "No, sweetheart. You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to. But that man said my gift would be wasted. Your father and I will never let anyone make you feel that way," Mrs. Zhang said firmly. "Your gift is yours, not theirs. You get to decide how to share it with the world." The following weeks brought more offers. Music conservatories across the country extended invitations. A famous pianist offered to take Mia as his only private student. Television shows requested appearances. A recording company suggested an album of classical pieces performed by the miniature maestro, as one newspaper had nicknamed her. Through it all, the Zhangs tried to maintain normalcy. Mia continued attending school, though she now spent her music period giving impromptu lessons to interested classmates on the school's new piano. She practiced at home each evening but also made time for cartoons, bike rides with Leo, and her growing rock collection. Professor Chen became their trusted advisor, helping filter through the overwhelming number of opportunities. "The most important thing," he reminded them, "is that Mia continues to love music. Push too hard, and that love can turn to resentment." One rainy Saturday, Mr. Zhang drove Mia to the city for a special event. The State Symphony Orchestra was performing a children's concert, and Mia had been invited as a guest of honor. Backstage, she met the conductor, an energetic woman with wild curly hair who knelt to shake Mia's hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you," the conductor said warmly. "Your competition performance was magnificent." Mia thanked her shyly, then peered around the conductor at the musicians warming up. "There are so many instruments," she whispered in awe. The conductor smiled. "Would you like to meet some of them?" She led Mia through the orchestra, introducing her to violinists, cellists, flutists, and percussionists. Each musician played a small sample of their instrument's sound. Mia listened with rapt attention, her eyes wide and curious. When they reached the harpist, a gentle-looking woman with silver-streaked hair, something magical happened. The harpist played a glissando, her fingers sweeping across the strings to create a cascade of notes. Mia gasped, her hand reaching out involuntarily as if to touch the beautiful sound. "Would you like to try?" the harpist offered. Mia nodded eagerly. With the woman's guidance, she ran her small fingers across the strings, laughing with delight at the sound she created. The conductor watched thoughtfully. Later, she pulled Mr. Zhang aside. "Your daughter has a remarkable connection to music that goes beyond the piano," she observed. "Have you considered letting her explore other instruments as well?" That evening, Mia couldn't stop talking about the harp, the violin, the oboe. "They all make such different sounds," she explained excitedly to her family. "But they fit together like puzzle pieces." Mrs. Zhang looked at her husband. "Perhaps there's another path we haven't considered." The next day, they sat down with Mia for a serious conversation. "We've been thinking about all these opportunities," Mr. Zhang began. And we want to know what you want, Mia. Not what makes other people happy, but what makes you happy. Mia thought carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. I want to play music, she said finally. Lots of different music. And I want to stay with you and Leo. Her parents smiled with relief. Then that's what we'll do, Mrs. Zhang promised. Together with Professor Chen, they crafted a plan. Mia would continue her regular education while taking lessons from Professor Chen twice a week. She would perform occasionally, but not so much that it interfered with her childhood. Each summer, she would attend a 2-week music camp where she could explore different instruments and musical styles. Most importantly, she would remain at home with her family, growing up surrounded by the love and stability every child needs. The following weekend, the Zhangs drove to a nearby lake for a picnic. While Mr. and Mrs. Zhang set up lunch, Mia and Leo skipped stones across the water, competing to see who could make the most jumps before their stone sank. I got 5, Leo shouted triumphantly. Beat that! Mia laughed, searching for the perfect flat stone. The sun warmed her back and the breeze carried the scent of pine trees and fresh water. In the distance, a bird sang a complex melody, and without thinking, Mia hummed along, matching its notes perfectly. Music was everywhere, she realized. In the splash of stones hitting water, in her brother's laughter, in the rhythm of the waves lapping against the shore, and she had all the time in the world to discover it, one note at a time. As Mia launched her stone across the lake, achieving an impressive 6 skips, she felt a contentment that no grand concert hall or prestigious academy could provide. Here, with her family, she could be both an extraordinary musician and an ordinary little girl. And that, she decided, was the most beautiful composition of all. 3 years passed in a blur of growth and discovery. Mia Zhang, now 11 years old, had grown taller, though she was still small for her age. Her dark hair, once worn in childish braids, now fell in a straight curtain past her shoulders. She had lost 2 baby teeth, gained a sprinkling of freckles across her nose, and developed a quiet confidence that showed in her straight posture and thoughtful gaze. The piano remained her first love, but true to the path her family had chosen, she had explored other instruments as well. She could now play simple pieces on the violin, had taken a semester of harp lessons, and was teaching herself the flute. Music theory, once a mystery to her, was now becoming as familiar as arithmetic. Life had found a comfortable rhythm for the Zhang family. Mia attended regular school during the week, with private lessons from Professor Chen every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. One weekend each month, they traveled to the city for Mia to participate in a youth orchestra program. During summer break, she attended a 2-week music camp in the mountains where young musicians from across the country gathered to learn and perform together. She performed concerts, occasionally, usually charity events for children's hospitals or school fundraisers. These performances were kept deliberately low-key, with the focus on the cause rather than on Mia, herself. The media frenzy that had followed her competition win had eventually died down when the Zhangs made it clear they wouldn't be parading their daughter for public consumption, though offers still came regularly for international tours, exclusive academies, recording contracts. They were politely declined or deferred to when she's older. Instead, Mia had been given the gift of a relatively normal childhood. She had friends at school who knew her as more than just the piano girl. She joined the science club, played soccer on weekends, and squabbled with her brother over whose turn it was to take out the trash. But the extraordinary gift that had first revealed itself when she was 8 continued to develop in remarkable ways. On a crisp autumn morning, Mia sat at the grand piano that now occupied the Zhang's living room, a generous gift from an anonymous donor after her competition win. Her fingers moved over the keys, but this time she wasn't playing a piece composed by Mozart or Chopin or Beethoven. She was creating her own music. Mr. Zhang paused in the door, white coffee mug in hand, listening to the melody taking shape. It had a wistful quality, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a rainstorm. The harmonies were unexpected yet perfectly balanced, creating emotional textures that seemed far too sophisticated for a composer of 11 years. "That's beautiful, Mia," he said when she finally lifted her hands from the keys. "Is it new?" Mia nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been hearing it in my dreams. It's about the changing seasons, how everything has to end but then something new begins." Mr. Zhang smiled, continually amazed by his daughter's way of translating life's observations into sound. "Have you written it down?" "Not yet. I'm still working on the middle section." Unlike most composers who worked with notation first, Mia composed entirely by ear, only writing down her pieces after they were complete. Later that day, Professor Chen arrived for Mia's lesson. Now in his 60s, the professor moved a bit more slowly, but his eyes remained sharp and his enthusiasm for music undimmed. He had become like family to the Zhangs over the years, joining them for holiday meals and attending Leo's science fairs with the same support he showed for Mia's recitals. "I have something to show you," Mia told him as they settled at the piano. She played her new composition, fingers dancing over the keys with the confidence that came from 3 years of dedicated practice. When she finished, Professor Chen was silent for a long moment. "Mia," he said finally, "this is extraordinary. Not just technically impressive, but emotionally mature. You found your voice as a composer. Do you think other people would like it?" she asked, suddenly shy. The professor nodded thoughtfully. "I think many people would. In fact, I have a proposal for you." He explained that the State Symphony Orchestra was planning a special concert featuring works by young composers. They've asked if you might have something to submit. Your piece would be performed by the full orchestra, with you as the piano soloist if you wished. Mia's eyes widened. "A real orchestra would play my music?" "Yes, but it would require expanding this piano piece into a full orchestral composition. It's complex work, arranging for all those different instruments. I could help you, but it would mean many extra hours of study and preparation." Mia bit her lip, considering. "Could I think about it?" That evening, the Zhang family gathered around their dining table, now slightly worn from years of family meals, homework sessions, and game nights. As they passed dishes of stir-fried vegetables and rice, Mia explained Professor Chen's offer. "It sounds like an amazing opportunity," Mrs. Zhang said. "But it's entirely your decision, Mia." Leo, now 13 and in the midst of a growth spurt that had him towering over his sister, paused his enthusiastic eating. "You should do it, Mia. Your music is too good to keep to yourself." Mr. Zhang watched his daughter carefully. "What are you thinking, sweetheart? I can see those wheels turning in your head." Mia pushed her rice around her plate. "I'm thinking about Justine." The family fell silent.
Justine was a 12-year-old girl Mia had met at the children's hospital where she occasionally performed.
Born with a rare genetic condition, Justine spent most of her time in a wheelchair. Despite her physical limitations, she had a bright, curious mind and a love for music that matched Mia's own. The two girls had formed an instant connection. "She told me that when she hears beautiful music, she forgets about being sick," Mia continued. "She said it takes her places her body can't go." Mrs. Zhang reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "And you want to write music for people like Justine?" Mia nodded. "I want my music to help people, not just to show what I can do, but to make them feel something that helps." The next day, Mia called Professor Chen with her decision. She would compose for the orchestra concert, but with a condition: the event would raise funds for the children's hospital where Justine and other kids like her received treatment. What followed were months of intense work. Mia learned orchestration, how to write for strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. She discovered how to layer sounds to create rich textures, how to balance different instrumental voices, and how to build dramatic moments that would resonate throughout a concert hall. Professor Chen guided her, but the music itself came entirely from Mia. She called her piece Beyond Horizons, inspired by her conversations with Justine about imagining places beyond hospital walls. As spring approached, rehearsals began. Mia sat in the symphony hall, a small figure among music stands and serious adult musicians, listening as her composition took shape in 3 dimensions. It was both thrilling and terrifying to hear her private musical thoughts interpreted by others. The conductor, the same curly-haired woman who had first introduced Mia to the orchestra years earlier, took a special interest in the project. "You've created something special," she told Mia during a break. "These musicians have played thousands of pieces, but they're genuinely moved by yours." That's rare. On the night of the concert, the Zhang family arrived early. The hall was already filling with people, not just classical music enthusiasts, but families with children, hospital staff, and community members drawn by the story of the young composer and the cause she supported. Backstage, Mia peeked through the curtain at the gathering crowd. Her stomach fluttered with butterflies. "Nervous?" asked a voice behind her. She turned to find Justine in her wheelchair accompanied by her parents. The girl wore a party dress and a bright smile. "A little," Mia admitted. "What if they don't like it?" "They will," Justine said with absolute certainty, "because it comes from your heart." Mia bent down to hug her friend. "I wrote it for you, for all of you at the hospital." "Then it's already perfect," Justine replied. When it was time, Mia walked onto the stage in her simple blue dress. The audience applauded warmly as she took her place at the piano. The conductor raised her baton and the hall fell silent. The music began softly, a single note from Mia's piano, joined gradually by strings, then woodwinds, building into a theme that spoke of hope and possibility. As the piece progressed, it traveled through moments of struggle and doubt, tension and release. The piano part, Mia's own voice within the orchestral landscape, wove in and out, sometimes leading, sometimes supporting, but always essential to the story being told. In the audience, Mrs. Zhang held her husband's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. Not from sorrow, but from witnessing the pure, undiluted expression of their daughter's soul. Beside them, Leo sat uncharacteristically still, his usual teenage restlessness forgotten as he was swept away by his sister's creation. When the final notes faded, there was that familiar moment of silence, the space between experience and reaction that Mia had come to recognize from her very first performances. Then the applause began, growing until the entire hall was on its feet. Mia stood to acknowledge the ovation, her face flushed with emotion. The conductor motioned for her to take a bow alongside the orchestra. As she did, she caught sight of Justine in the front row, clapping wildly, her face alight with joy. After the concert, there was a reception in the lobby. People lined up to congratulate Mia, including several well-known composers who had come specifically to hear the prodigy's original work. Reporters asked for interviews. Music directors from prestigious institutions handed business cards to her parents. But the moment that mattered most came when an elderly man approached her quietly. His eyes were wet with tears. "I lost my wife 3 months ago," he told Mia. "Tonight is the first time since then that I've felt something besides grief. Your music reminded me that beauty still exists in the world. Thank you for that gift." As the evening wound down, Mia slipped away from the crowd to find a quiet corner. Professor Chen found her there sitting on a window ledge looking out at the city lights. "How do you feel?" he asked, sitting beside her. Mia considered the question carefully. "Happy," she said finally. "But also, responsible." "Responsible? How so?" "I didn't understand before, but I do now," she explained. "My music can touch people in ways I never imagined. That's a kind of power, isn't it? And with power comes responsibility." Professor Chen nodded, struck by the wisdom in her young face. "That's a profound understanding for someone your age. Many artists never grasp that." Mia turned back to the window. "I'm glad we waited. I'm glad I had these years to just be a kid, to learn and grow without pressure. I think my music is better because of it." Later that night, as the Zhang family drove home, Mia dozed in the back seat, exhausted from the emotion of the evening. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang spoke in hushed tones. "What happens next?" Mrs. Zhang wondered. "After tonight, the offers will come pouring in again." Mr. Zhang glanced at his sleeping daughter in the rearview mirror. "We'll do what we've always done. Let Mia lead the way, keep her grounded, protect her childhood for as long as we can." "She's growing up so fast," Mrs. Zhang sighed. "But she's growing up strong," her husband replied, "with a clear sense of who she is and what her music means. That's more important than any acclaim or achievement." As they pulled into their driveway, Mia stirred and opened her eyes. "Are we home?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart," her mother answered. "We're home." Mia smiled and closed her eyes again, dreaming of new melodies, new horizons to explore, and all the people waiting to be touched by the gift she was only beginning to understand.